Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. Big day for American domestic politics. Hard to believe, but the Iowa caucuses are today. The weather is absolutely horrendous.
Everywhere, here included.
Indeed. And so we'll see whether that's going to make a difference. We've got the very last Iowa poll, the one that's considered to be the highest quality. We'll break that down for you. Saagar and I have got our own predictions for what it's worth. We're also taking a look at the way that Trump has decided at the very last moments here to go after Vivek Ramaswamy, and Vivek is responding in a very interesting fashion. Trump also, this is kind of funny, taking out ads against Nikki Haley on MSNBC.
Brilliant, which we will tell you about.
It has turned out a lot of her support is independents, but also some Democrats who may cross over, so we'll take a look at that. Ron DeSantis is receiving a participation trophy in Iowa. Let's see if he can surpass expectations and get back in the game. At the same time, we're also marking 100 days of Israel's assault on Gaza. We'll break down the very latest from you there. Some pretty stunning comments from Netanyahu about how this is our war too. And in line with that, we actually, it appears, have suffered our first casualties in that war, in our backing up of Israel. So a lot to break down for you there, and the latest fallout from our strikes on Yemen, which occurred over the weekend. Saagar's also going to be taking a look at the case of a journalist who died imprisoned in Ukraine without the American press or the American president saying a damn word. So whether or not you agreed with this man and his views, this was an American citizen who was basically killed in Ukrainian detention and went without a single word from anyone here in America.
It's a really tragic case. I'm going to break it down for everybody. But before we get to that, I guess I'm trying to pivot to some positive things here. This really is a fun kickoff for us, actual 2024 election season. We've got a discount going on for our yearly membership. We can put it up there on the screen. It's the election discount. You can take advantage of it at breakingpoints.com to support all of our work. We will have the show today. We will have breaking news results tonight, and then tomorrow morning, the four of us, me and Krystal and the Counterpoints team will also be here at the desk early, bright and early with no sleep in order to break everything down for you. And then New Hampshire as well, we've got big plans. So if you can help support all of our work that goes on with that, you can take advantage, breakingpoints.com.
Yes.
I guess
we should also mention.
Oh, that's right, because of the weather.
Because of the weather, the RFK Jr. focus group that we had scheduled for this weekend has had to be postponed. It is still going to be in the works. We've got a tentative date rescheduled and all the participants lined up and whatever. So we will get that to you, but we didn't want to fly people out to Detroit in the middle of a snowstorm.
Exactly.
Didn't seem like that was particularly
Didn't
smart
seem
idea.
exactly prudent. There was like several inches of snow, ridiculous wind chill. People, it wouldn't have even been safe for the participants to arrive.
Nobody
would
have showed up.
I
hope nobody would have showed up.
It's a whole thing. It has on the books. It's already been rescheduled. We're going to bring it to you as soon as possible, and we will tease those results as they come. So let's go ahead and begin with Iowa. Today is the Iowa caucuses. People will begin voting later on tonight in their bizarre Byzantine, some would say, system. Before we get to that, we should actually go over, as Krystal mentioned, the final Des Moines Register poll. It's considered one of the gold standard polls in the state. Let's go ahead and put it up there on the screen so everyone can see. So we've got Donald Trump at 48%, Nikki Haley at 20%, Governor Ron DeSantis at 16%, Vivek Ramaswamy at 8%, Asa Hutchinson a whopping
Still hanging in there,
and Ryan Binkley. I actually don't know who Ryan is, but okay.
Businessman,
Ryan,
like that.
whatever. There's always one. There's a guy who always comes at, somehow he's there. What we find here is that Trump overwhelmingly winning with 28% margin. The big question, and we will reveal what we think actually about this, is the Trump support soft? Is it overstated? And we were comparing a little bit to results from 2016. I have it in front of me here. In 2016, the Iowa Des Moines Register poll actually had Trump at 28% and Ted Cruz at 23%. The final results actually had Ted Cruz winning the Iowa caucuses with 27.6% and Trump at 24.3%. As you can see right there from the 2016 results, Marco Rubio coming in at 23%. So the question, Krystal, is that going to happen again this time? Is Trump's support going to be understated? I personally think, though, because the dynamics are so different this time around, Ted Cruz, if people remember, had a tremendous operation in Iowa. It also was at a time of much more uncertainty. That was the very first vote ever cast in official proceeding for Donald Trump. The juggernaut that he was politically did not yet quite exist, and there was a different evangelical turnout. He hadn't been president yet. His favorability numbers were not necessarily where they are right now. And then the problem also, in my opinion, Chris, Krystal, is that Ted Cruz was a far more formidable candidate than both Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, kind of in their own way. DeSantis has tried to mimic the 2016 playbook, but Nikki Haley is not running, for the same conservative voters. She's actually winning a decent amount of Democratic voters. Fine if you're running in a general election, but not when you're running in an overall Republican primary.
Yeah, and let me explain that piece a little bit so people can understand. So traditionally, Democrats and Republicans both have Iowa as their first voting contest, their first caucus on the map. This is sort of like famous political history, et cetera. Because Joe Biden and the DNC wanted to make sure to rig the primary on his behalf, and also because Iowa, let's be honest, last time around for the Democrats, utter and complete debacle.
Right.
So New Hampshire sort of put up a fight about getting bumped back in the lineup. They're still going ahead. They're being penalized by the DNC. We'll talk about that, more as we get to New Hampshire. But Iowa, I think because they had such an embarrassing situation unfold last time, just kind of hung their heads in shame. We're like, all right, fine, we'll go to the back of the line. So there is no Democratic voting tonight. What that means is that theoretically, Democrats who want to vote in the Republican caucus and try to sow a little bit of chaos or try to register their disapproval of Donald Trump, they can actually register as a Republican at the caucus site itself and go ahead and vote in a Republican primary. Polls show, and I think we have the numbers we could put up in a minute, polls show a significant number of Democrats are actually planning to back Nikki Haley and say that if she doesn't win, they're going to vote for Joe Biden in the general election. Now, I am a little bit skeptical because I always see these narratives come up when it's election time of like, oh, the Republicans are going to cross over and they're going to cause chaos in the Democratic vote, or the Democrats are going to cross over and they're going to cause chaos, et cetera, et cetera. I've never seen it happen in such large numbers that it really makes a significant difference.
That's right.
Now, independents are another story, and this is why Nikki Haley's doing well in New Hampshire, because you have a large group of independents who historically do vote in the New Hampshire primary. And so those independents, if they're looking to, be able to participate in democracy, their only opportunity to do so is in the Republican caucus. So I could see a significant number of independents showing up to caucus with the Republicans tonight. So that's kind of the story of Nikki Haley's support, especially with Chris Christie dropping out. She is really consolidating that quote unquote hard, like anti-Trump vote. And based on the numbers, the majority, this won't surprise you. I mean, it's a very like wine track, beer track kind of situation. Her support is overwhelmingly white, college-educated, suburban. And so as you're looking at the map tonight and as things are unfolding, those are the places where if she's going to have a big night, they should be coming in really strong for her. And if she's not doing well there, then she's not really going to do well anywhere.
That's another good reason. Whenever you're watching the returns, usually these urban centers are the ones who can report more quickly, and they're also the easiest ones for reporters and all that to get to. So in some cases, you can actually see overstated support for the urban-backed candidates, the suburban people who would like to support Nikki Haley. For example, let's put this up there on the screen, as Krystal alluded to, from NBC News. They asked the question, if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee in the general election, would you vote for him, vote for Joe Biden, vote for RFK Jr., or vote for somebody else? 43% of Nikki Haley supporters say that they would vote for Joe Biden. Far more, almost double of the 23% who say that they would vote for Trump. 8% say that they would vote for Bobby Kennedy, and then 19% say they would either vote for another third party or they are not sure. So it's pretty substantial, the vast, the plurality of those Nikki Haley voters who will vote tonight in the Des Moines, or at least who are slated to vote tonight in the Iowa caucuses, according to the Des Moines Register poll, are Democrats. And so that pretty significant
if you're
Democratic
a Republican,
crossover.
You don't want to see those numbers.
You don't want to see those numbers in a freaking Republican primary. Again, that's something that you may want to see in a general election, but you got to get to the election first. And I think that's the major problem that they have right now. So as we mentioned too, in terms of the overall polling average, this can sometimes be even more significant. Let's go and put this up there, please, on the screen. So this is what we have for the RCP average, the average of all of the polls going into this over the last 5 to 10 days. 52% for Donald Trump, 18% for Nikki Haley, 15.5% for Ron DeSantis, 6.5% for Vivek Ramaswamy, and 3.5% for Chris Christie. Chris Christie obviously no longer in the race, so you can kind of distribute that, probably the majority of that, to Nikki Haley, which kind of does line up, Krystal, with the numbers that we saw in the final Des Moines Register poll. But then the big question hanging over all of this is the same one blanketing Washington today. What about the damn weather? The weather in Iowa is completely insane. We have a local news clip here just to lay out how this is the coldest caucus literally on record, with minus 30 or so temperatures expected with wind chill. Let's take a listen.
The high temperature Monday will be just below zero, far colder than the coldest caucus on record. That was 16 degrees in 2004. Now, the wind chill Monday will be, as we mentioned, 20 to 30 degrees below zero. Again, much colder than minus 21 degrees. That was way back in 1972. So what does it mean? KCCI political analyst Dennis Goldford says the weather likely will affect the Iowa caucus results. Fewer people may turn out to vote for their favorite candidate, and all those poll results and the outcomes certainly could change.
The concern for the various candidates, aside from not being able to get to scheduled venues, is that their supporters just may not be able to get to their caucus sites, or they may decide it's a done deal, or it's just not worth it to them.
Yeah, it would have to be worth a lot for me, Krystal, to be able to go out there. So currently, as you and I are speaking, it is minus 11 degrees Fahrenheit in Des Moines, Iowa.
Is that the feels like, or
no.
the
That's the temperature. According to the National Weather Service, the feels like is wind chills below as low as 35 below zero. So the lowest I've ever personally experienced is minus 20, and that's when your snot actually freezes to your face. So yeah, just
that's
to make it real.
The same for me.
As
First time I
real
was
as
in
it is.
Minneapolis. Yeah, you
Exactly.
just like go outside. It like punches you in the face.
It's
that
horrible.
level of cold.
It's horrible.
There's a couple ways to look at this in terms of like, first of all, does it make a difference at all? Right? Does it just decrease voter turnout overall, but in similar percentages across the board? That's very possible. One way to spin it, if you're a Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis person, is like, oh, well, Trump support is strongest in the more rural areas where it's more difficult. The roads will be less treated. You got to travel further in order to get to the caucus site. So perhaps it has more of an impact on his support versus the Nikki Haley support, which is in the more suburban, urban areas. And I think Ron DeSantis is kind of like evenly distributed across the state. So that's one theory of the case. The other theory of the case is that if you dig into the numbers in that Des Moines Register poll, Nikki Haley's supporters, like the support among her supporters, is extraordinarily weak.
Yes.
9% of people who say they're going to caucus for Nikki Haley say they're extremely enthusiastic about it. 9%. The equivalent number for Donald Trump is 49%. For Ron DeSantis, it's 23%. Of his supporters say they are extremely enthusiastic. So you would think that when it requires so much to be able to go out in freaking minus 30-degree weather and the driving snow and with the iced over roads and whatever to go caucus, that you better be extremely enthusiastic to go out and do that. That would, augur more in the direction of Donald Trump. So take that for what it's worth. But again, I do think even though the top line number for Nikki in this Des Moines Register poll was pretty good, especially the fact she jumps ahead of Ron DeSantis, and she really has staked her claim on New Hampshire. That's really where she wants to put in a great showing. So if she's able to pull off a strong second in Iowa, that would be a very good finish for her. But if you dig into these numbers, Ann Seltzer, who does this poll, said it was jaw-dropping, the lack of enthusiasm for Nikki Haley evidenced by those polls. And then you add to what we were saying before, that much of her support is like Democrats and independents. Are they really going to brave the conditions to go out and vote in a Republican caucus? I think that's a gigantic question mark.
Yeah, she says, quote, her enthusiasm numbers, again, I think are on the edge of jaw dropping. 61% are just mildly enthusiastic or not enthusiastic. It just seems at odds with the candidate moving up. She actually says, according to her own poll vastly overstates Nikki Haley's support. And don't forget, Krystal, we have to explain like the bizarre caucus system, the way that it actually works, where there's a first round, but then there's also second round before we get to the eventual vote total. So let's say that she does have soft support. Number one, that's going to be very difficult in terms of getting people out to the actual polls. And then in the various, precincts where she doesn't rise to the percentage that she would need to in the first vote, then her voters would then be able to scatter. But then the question is, if they don't support any anybody other candidate than her, are they going to leave the caucus? And this is where the actual voting system gets just completely awry. We saw this actually previously, part of why it was so difficult in the whole software meltdown or whatever for the DNC. This was part of what broke the actual software, is that they weren't able to account for the second count voting in this system.
Yeah, it was just total, complete meltdown of the tech that they were relying on previously. They'd use sort of more just like by hand, more antiquated methods that turned out to be a lot more reliable than they paid some, you know, rising Democratic consultant star to build this crap who happened to be affiliated with Pete Buttigieg, but we'll just leave all of that in the past. I will never forget, though, when we were covering that at Rising, we were doing like a live stream. We're waiting for the results. Anytime the results are sure to start coming in.
Yeah, they kept coming in the ear. They're like, it's coming now. We're like, okay. And I remember being on Twitter and be like, I don't think so. And then we stretched it as long as we possibly could. And then at a certain point, I think it must have been like 10:30 or so, and we were like, okay, like I guess we're just gonna go home. I don't really know what's happening.
And the Pete came out and just like declared victory based on nothing. Like, and the media's like, okay, you won. Sure, let's move on to New Hampshire. It was crazy. Anyway, that's why Democrats, you know, that and the fact that I also want to make sure to mention Joe Biden and the DNC have just decided, like, we're not doing democracy. We're going to kill democracy to try to save democracy. A bunch of states have just completely canceled their primaries, even though Joe Biden has challengers. He has Cenk Uygur. Now, there's questions constitutionally about him, but you can let the courts resolve whether he is, you know, actually a legit presidential candidate or not. You've got Marianne Williamson, who's been running for quite a long time, and you have a congressman, Dean Phillips, who is running against him as well. And rather than having the confidence to say, okay, we believe in our guy, we think, and the polls demonstrate that he's overwhelmingly the favorite, let's have a contest and, you know, let people go out and register their choice. A number of these states have just completely canceled their primaries. And in Iowa, as I said, they were part of the shift in the lineup to try to make sure to bolster Joe Biden, because he did poorly in Iowa last time. He did poorly in New Hampshire, very poorly in New Hampshire last time. So they demoted them because they did not align with the DNC's chosen candidate of Joe Biden. And Iowa's decided just to go along with that. New Hampshire's putting up more of a fight. Joe Biden will be only a write-in candidate in the state of New Hampshire. But, you know, that's why you have the Republicans going and not the Democrats in terms of Iowa. So when I look at all of this, the weather, Nikki Haley seems to be surging at the right time, but then again, Iowa's not a great state for her, and you dig into these polls, and you're like, her people don't really care about whether she wins or not, and they're like mostly Democrats and independents and whatever. I feel like, in terms of my prediction, I think Trump is going to more or less hit the percentage point that he is getting in this Des Moines Register poll, right around 50. Maybe I'm going to say a little bit under 50. I'm going to say he doesn't quite hit the 50 percentage point. I think Ron is actually going to be able to come from behind and get the second place win from Nikki and maybe get like 18 to 20 percentage point. And I think Nikki's support in this poll is a bit overstated, that you could knock off like 5 points from the Des Moines Register poll. And that's roughly where Nikki will come in. I think Vivek will be a little bit stronger. I think the Des Moines Register poll had him at 8. I'd put him at like 10.
Yes.
Because he's done so much, and we'll put the map up on the screen a little bit when we talk about more about him and Trump. He has done so much work on the ground. I just have to, in my head, believe that that counts for something, that, you know, his people, because they met him, because he was there, they feel some sort of commitment to him to actually turn up on a difficult caucus night. So I'd put him more in the 10 percentage points, which is kind of why I'm thinking maybe Trump stays under 50 percentage points, because out of all of these candidates, Vivek eats into Trump's margins the most because they're running the most similar type of campaign.
Yeah, so my numbers are, I agree with you. I think Trump is roughly going to be where he is. He's going to be around 48, 50%. It's possible that he goes over. It actually, I would say it's more likely just because of the whole second system. I agree completely. I think Nikki Haley's support is vastly overstated, so she's going to come down probably to 3rd%. Ron will come in at 2nd, but likely where Haley currently is, around 20. And I also believe that Vivek Ramaswamy, I think he could go as high as 15%, possibly.
Really?
I think it's possible he could even beat Nikki Haley. This could be totally wrong, and actually, this is going to be a big test. We're going to talk a lot about this in our Vivek section. Is I still have to believe, as you do, that this stuff matters. Handshaking matters. Going to 94 out of the 99 counties in Iowa matters. Spending millions of dollars, you know, traversing the state. He's got all of these endorsements of these local politicians. Steve King, you know, the former congressman. Also, listen, I mean, he matters in Iowa. Okay, he was a very popular man in Iowa.
Not that popular. I mean, he almost lost in like an extraordinarily Republican district.
Amongst Republicans, he is popular.
Didn't he lose in a primary? Republican primary?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
More what I would say is amongst Trump people,
I'm not sure that's who I'd want backing, but
amongst
anyway.
Trump people, that's who I would want on my side. So he's got enough of these, like, he's got these MAGA, every MAGA influencer in the country is down with Vivek right now in his Suburban, traversing the state. You've got people like Candace Owens who've been going around with him. My point only being that I think it's understated to a point. I've also seen some polls as well that have either left him out or they're diminishing his support. So if there is to be an upset, I think it would be him maybe coming in third. And look, maybe this is hopium on my part. I just want to believe that campaigning still matters.
Yeah.
But it's possible it doesn't. It may not at all. I could be totally wrong.
For me, my thinking on Vivek cuts in two directions, which is why I only give him like a couple point bump over what the Des Moines Register poll has him at, which is on the one hand, yeah, I think the in-person stuff matters. On the other hand, I feel like the internet-fueled candidates typically underperform. I'm thinking about Andrew Yang last time around where you had all of this online, he was everywhere and there's huge support and you're thinking this has got to count for something in the polls and he's got Dave Chappelle and other people who are campaigning for him. And then when it comes down to caucus night, he actually underperforms where he was in the polls. And, you know, I feel like that's sort of the case with these candidates who are very online, which I would characterize Vivek as being. So that's why I give him a little bump up for all the work that he's doing on the grounds. But the other problem for him is like, you know, his supporters, and we'll talk about this more when we get to the Vivek versus Trump thing, but like, they're basically Trump supporters. They still like Trump. I mean, Vivek's still out there like he's the greatest president of all time. So why are you gonna vote for Vivek instead of Trump then? It doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's why he struggled to achieve liftoff. But I mean, fundamentally, it's kind of the same problem that all of these candidates have faced, which is that they all ran campaigns that were predicated on something will take Trump out of the equation. I'm not going to be the one to make the argument to take him out of the equation, but something maybe will happen that will take him out of the equation, and I'm going to position myself to be the top Trump alternative. That simply hasn't manifested itself. Trump is still there. He's in some ways stronger than other. I saw, I think it was a CBS News poll that came out this weekend that had him at his highest level national support in terms of Republican primary yet. So if they were betting on Trump just vanishing and going away or being imprisoned or whatever, that certainly hasn't panned out. And it has left them all bizarrely squabbling for a meaningless second place position that doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah, I saw a DeSantis, kind of, I guess, influencer, if you will, and I was reading some of his thought process. And, it's Will Chamberlain, just so people know. I've followed him now for quite a long time. He was actually, why he interests me is he was a MAGA guy, and now he's a DeSantis guy.
Yeah.
Very much on the case of, like, DeSantis is the guy who will actually get it done. And he's like, look, at the end of the day, like, RDS tried his best. Like, he ran a race, which is one about actually getting things done. But the dynamics of the race just were fundamentally difficult after the Mar-a-Lago raid. And I do really think, you know, history is very different if that Mar-a-Lago raid does not happen. I'm not saying he wouldn't win, but I don't know necessarily if he would be able to win as much. If you look, and it's very interesting, if I've gone through and read the quotes that, you know, in general that the reporters are able to find amongst these people who are like, I'm all in with Trump no matter what. Almost every single one of them are like, look at Colorado, look at Mar-a-Lago, look at what happened here. They're out to get him, you know. I mean, Tucker even, he was like, listen, you know, you can't let that stand. Maybe they would all come up with different excuses. It's actually incredibly possible if they were running. But it's convenient enough that it's enough to just be like, no, I'm not even going to think about it.
I mean, if you're a DeSantis person, I think that's reasonable cope. But I do think it's cope because
maybe, I don't know.
Even before the Mar-a-Lago raid, we were looking at this thing and saying, it just doesn't make sense because you have to give people a reason to abandon this guy. And you're not willing to do that. And by the way, they still really like him. And he's still extremely popular. So I don't really think that it maybe like sharpened the dynamics or consolidated them more quickly. But you also have to look at the fact that once Ron DeSantis actually got out on the campaign trail, he's an awkward dude. He's not charismatic. He's not compelling. He's like kind of hard to watch and kind of hard to be around. And he's not that great on a debate stage. So even if you hadn't had the Mar-a-Lago raid, I don't think that Ron DeSantis would have worn well over time and been able to maintain the margins that he was hitting, which he was still trailing Trump, even right after the midterms when you had this dramatic demonstration of like, oh, all the Trump-backed candidates got their butts handed to them and Ron DeSantis romped in Florida. You know, I always think those memories were going to fade pretty quickly, especially when you just look at these two people and putting aside however you feel about them, which I don't feel great about either one of them. Trump has just so much more of an it factor. He is so much more of a star player. DeSantis is so much more of a like B-league player. It's just manifestly obvious when you see the two of them out there on the campaign trail. So even without Mar-a-Lago or Colorado or whatever, I think this was going to be the inevitable result.
Look,
we will never know.
That's what I always believed too. I was just trying to give the case. What I would say with Trump is, to your point, he's funny, man. I don't know what else to say. He's good. He loves it. He loves the game. He loves being up there as evidence of that, and he's funny. Just take a look at what he said to people about why they need to come out and vote for in the Iowa caucuses, even if they're sick as a dog. Let's take a listen.
You can't sit home. If you're sick as a dog, you say, darling, I gotta make it. Even if you vote and then pass away, it's worth it.
Even if you vote and die, it's still worth it. As long as you come out for Trump. Incredible. There's nobody else who would say it.
Ron DeSantis was not going to compete with that man.
Yeah, it's just too
And there is no alternate timeline in which Ron DeSantis wins. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.